Okay, I'm glad to see Jenny here, Brittany, Mason, you've just joined. We'll have, I'm sure, several of us. And yeah, we're a little bit early as usual. So if somebody has to double back, they can see the recording to do that. So welcome on a day that's probably going to get wild this afternoon in terms of weather. All right. Now, I'm going to go ahead and take a look over here in terms of where we are, and let's just do some kind of housekeeping or logistics. And we're over here in week 3. Now, remember, as I've said, there are going to be a number of times as we move along that we're going to go through. We're probably going to be working ahead in terms of the cases, and I do that because near the end of the course, you'll have some flex time to work on some projects as well as the final, and it's so it will just, I try to be flexible with that in the event that we get hung up on a case or something happens beyond our control. But this week we've taken a look at XLS4, and we've also taken a look at XLS5. Excuse me. And then and so those should be uploaded, although they're due on the 22nd. Okay. Now, of course, the 22nd is going to be Friday, and then you also have the quiz from the few text. And I had discussed these resources here that I think are really worth your time and trouble to see. So I'm going to move us ahead in terms of working on the cases. And so we're going to go ahead and move down to week 4 or module week 4. And here's what I want to do today. I want to talk about XLS6, okay, and in that, and then on Thursday, what I will do is visit with you about the exam that's coming up, because remember now and I believe it's on the 29th, exam 1 part 1 will be due, or is it, yeah, let me see here. Yes, we do March 1st, my apologies, March 1st, which would be a week from this Friday. Okay, so that being said, we'll go back here and we'll take a look at, and so today I'm going to talk about case 6, and I have some files that are mentioned. I also have a key that you can upload, and we're going to be working over in chapter 18. So to kind of set the stage for where we are, I'm going to go ahead and take a look at the textbook. And we're over in chapter 18. That's where this case is found, and it deals with chapter 18.1 and figure 18.2. And we're going to be working with really the technical thing we'll be working with is a function in Excel called goalseek, G-O-A-L-S-E-E-K. So sometimes I mispronounce it or I don't pronounce it clearly. It's goal, and we're going to be looking at that. And the use of assumptions, the break-even use of assumptions, again, and use of, and we're going to look at break-even analysis. That's the business problem we're looking at, and then charting. And there are a couple of files that are over there, and I have a couple of files loaded in the files area, and one of them is Badger Jams, and this is an old case file back from spring of 17. And then we're going to look at, then I also have this Lemonade GS. That file is also in the files section of Canvas, pardon me. And it deals with, as I mentioned, chapters 18, figure 18.1, chapter 18, figure 1, and figure 2. So we're looking at break-even analysis as a tool, And this is a way that we are able to determine on the basis of units or on the basis of dollars what we're going to need to do in order to have revenues and expenses meet. You remember when we did the case on, when we did the city of Clintwood, which was XLS 5, we had revenues, we had expenses, and we needed to make sure that the revenues and expenses were either zero, which means they're in balance, or that we had a positive variance. In other words, we had a more revenue than expenses, which we could use to help pay forward expenses for the coming year, or we could just simply put them away in a reserve fund for a rainy day. Well, that's in a governmental setting. And in a business setting, we have to use break-even analysis to figure out how much we have to sell in order to at least pay all of our bills and not be losing money. And so the case gives us this. We have this case with the lemonade store, and it's a very simplistic one, but it's a good illustration. And the Badger Jams case that I have for you, and we'll look at it, is going to be really more highly instructive than we would believe. But I also want to make sure that you get to see the use of the goal seek tool. And so I have those files loaded for you there, and that Lemonade GS file, that's the first one. It's over in the files section, okay? And you should be able to just go over there and do a search for Lemonade and find it. So I'll go back here for a moment, and we'll go back and take a look at this. We'll go to the files section. And glad to have some more of you show up. We are starting early, so you can always double back if you can. Those who come in a little bit late. So the first thing I'm going to do is look for the Lemonade. And there it is. That's the case. You can see I just uploaded it a while ago to make sure that the file was there. And so you'll want to download the file to your desktop and save it there so you can upload it if you care after we work through it. Now, that being said, I want to go back over to the modules for a moment. And I'll go back to the modules. Okay. And you're going to see that I have a key. It's a file, a key XLS 6. I have a key file, and that's there, which you can upload for the workshop credit. And of course, that's where you upload it. It's not due till the 1st of March, but when we do these, it's probably not a bad idea to go ahead and get it uploaded to make sure that you get the credit for the workshop. Now, we've got 6 of us on here, and I'm hoping I'm going to see a whole bunch of people who come in later and who are going to have logged in. And I want to say this, I'm coming to the point now in the semester, and as we edge closer to week 6, I have to really start looking seriously. So remember, if you don't attend and log in during a ground-based session, or if you don't attend, i.e. log in and attend a live stream session, either at that time when it's given, like today at 12:30, or by noon the next day and see it, and I can see that you've done that, you've missed class, okay? And so I don't know how I could be any more forgiving or have it set up and ready to go. Now the persons there might be some who've worked ahead. If they have, they're in good shape. That being all said, let's look for a moment, and we're going to talk some about this notion of break even and what it means. So I'm going to start with the Badger Jams file, and that's the one that's the old case file that I have over there. Now I'm going to I'm going to minimize the screen here for just a second. And I have the Badger Jams file uploaded here. I have the Badger Jams file here on my desktop. It's called XLS Badger Jams Spring 17. Okay. And I'll take this and enable the editing. And it's down on my desktop. Now, as I've told you before, these old cases are a little bit more, have a little bit more expansive than are the cases in the Winston text. That's the Excel text. And the reason is because they're really more about showing you the particular steps to use an application or a function of something of that sort. This case is the Badger Jams is about doing some work with charting and developing an income and pro forma income statement, but also about teaching you a whole lot, as much as possible, about the use of break-even analysis and what it is. So I want to start with this file, the Badger Jams file, okay? And let's talk about, in fact, the whole file, the whole workbook, pardon me, the whole worksheet that I've got created for you. And of course, up here is, as all good worksheets will have, a documentation area. And this shows us the break-even analysis for one product. And then we start to move into the assumptions area. And as you can see, we've got a sale price for each unit. We have our fixed costs. Now, when we do break-even analysis, we're talking about a concept of the total cost concept. Total cost equals fixed costs, that's stuff that never changes, or that we had to pay for up front to get into run a business or expand a business, whatever you're doing, and then variable costs. And variable costs are those that change according to the level of business activity. Okay? Now, as we look here, and this is a little company, they were selling, I think, a case of jam of some type that they made. And then they had some fixed costs. Now, these folks they were getting ready to start the business. And so they started with saying, okay, we're going to have $12,000 here in rent. And then we're going to spend $5,550 in advertising. That we're going to have to purchase some equipment, a commercial stove, some cooking equipment, and the total fixed costs there are $25,700. Now, as that case was put together, as I recall, this is a company this was a person who decided to start this business, Badger Jams. They make jams, and this was what they would have to pay just to get the business started. And this is also known as sunk costs. Sunk costs are costs that you have to pay before you sell one item of product. Okay, it's your initial investment. And I like this case because it shows us that to be an entrepreneur, you have to have some real courage. Now, one of the other things in the case is that we have is the entrepreneur savings. This person had been saving some money. Maybe they had a retirement account, and so they had $64,000 here to live on while they got their business started. Okay, so this entrepreneur has said, okay, I've got $64,000 to live on while I get this business going, and also then I have all of these fixed costs that I have to pay. Now, there's some formatting things I could do, obviously, to create some color schemes for, say, this assumptions area and so forth. So there's always a little bit of tweaking that could be done. Okay? Now, we come down and we start to look at the total variable costs. Okay? And the variable costs are those that vary or change according to the level of business activity. Labor is a variable cost. The more business you have and the more people you have to have, the higher the variable cost. Okay? That would also include materials. If you're selling, like if you're the people at Badger Jams, they've got to pay money for preparation and packaging. Okay? And this is on a per unit basis. They've got to ship the stuff. They've got to send it. So for every unit they sell, they have $17.55 in variable costs. Now notice up here I've got the sale price of $39, so that's the revenue per unit. I have the total variable costs of $17.55. All right, so I sell each of these cases for $39. It costs me $17.55 to produce one, which means the difference is $20.40 per unit. And this is where we come to the concept, the idea of a thing called the contribution margin. Now you'll notice I've made a pretty extensive use of the name manager so that we understand the variables. And if you look here in the formula bar, you're going to see that the contribution margin equals the sales price minus the total variable costs. And this is on a per unit basis. You say, okay, what's important about that? Well, the contribution margin is the money that I have left over from each sale to pay my fixed costs. Fixed costs have to be paid either upfront as sunk costs or as things like rent or advertising. You've got to pay those. And so we have to know, all right, and how much do I have to make overall, and I'm looking at per unit basis, to break even. Most businesses that are started, 80% of them die within the first 5 years of their creation. Businesses, it's just difficult to start a brand new business and get it and nurture it through those formative times. It's like raising a child until the point that it starts to get some maturity. And then it gets market share and people know about the company and they have a business and they're a going concern. So being an entrepreneur takes a tremendous amount of courage. And for every person who starts a business on Shark Tank and makes $1 billion, there are hundreds of thousands of those people out there every year whose businesses never go anywhere. They just don't start. Okay? And I'll give you a really good example. There was a business here, a retail outlet here where I live, and they sold Italian gelato. They sold gelato, that Italian ice cream or frozen yogurt, whatever that material is. You eat the stuff, it's incredible taste. Now, they were in a retail location, all right, near a restaurant, in fact, near 2 restaurants, which is smart. They were in a place where there would be plenty of parking. And they had a good price on the product. I'm sure they were making a good return. But the truth was they just were never going to generate the volume they needed to survive. And so they were there for a while and they were gone because they just weren't going to sell enough product to pay their rent, to pay their help, etc. Through the years, as I've had students come to me and say, I think I would like to go into business myself. What advice do you have for me? And I really try to give them 2 pieces of advice. Number one, go talk to somebody who has successfully started a company. Sit down with them and hear their story, okay? Because they'll have some wisdom to pass on. Number 2, go talk to well-established companies that have franchises and find out what it takes to be to have one of their franchises. If you can get a franchise like a McDonald's or a Burger King or a company that has a national reputation, they're not going to let you be one of their franchisees unless you really know what you're doing, you have some capital, etc. Okay, so that's the smart play. Now, those of you who might be accounting students, I don't know if any of you have any accounting students take this course, they can go get their professional license, their CPA, and they can hang out their shingle and they can do people's taxes and work for businesses and have their own firm. And probably, if they play their cards right, do pretty well. If you go get a law degree, it's the same story, although you're probably better off, going to work for a big firm. And some people go work for a big firm and then leave. But, I always celebrate people who are entrepreneurs. My parents were, and it takes a lot of courage, lots and lots of courage. If you just look at this one figure right here, you could see this entrepreneur is taking their life savings and they're saying, okay, I'm going to try to make this company work. And so when we start to look at break-even analysis, and most of the time people won't do it, rarely do they. I call this the economic investment in the sense of what you had to forego. Let's say you have a great job and you're making $150,000 or $200,000 or $250,000 a year. You're running somebody's company or you're running the division of a company, and you just say, I want to be my own boss. I want to run my own company. That's fine, but make sure that you understand the day you leave to start your own company, you are giving up that. You're giving up the security that you had. And so you have to also say, all right, if I'm leaving, even if I don't take my retirement income, if I'm not working for that firm that paid me $100,000 or whatever a year, I have to count that as money. That's an opportunity cost. I spent that money. This is important for you to understand for a couple of reasons. First of all, obviously, to understand about the world of the entrepreneur. And I know we have a program here in entrepreneurial studies. I know that there are some courses we offer on, the entrepreneurial venture or the new company. Okay. And it's never as simple as the textbooks make it. None of this is. And while you can learn all these things, like how to put together a business plan and go out and look for venture capital, in the end, you will be fortunate if you make a go of it, if you're still operating after 5 years. Now, unfortunately, there are those times when people will want to start a business and they'll take their money and they'll get money from their mom and their dad, their Aunt Hilda and all of this, and they'll borrow all that money. And then if things don't go right and they go belly up, it's not pleasant. It's not good. When I started my career back working at Southeast Missouri State University over in Cape Girardeau, Missouri, down the Boot Heel, I worked as one of the business faculty. There we had what we called a small business development center. And then we had a small business institute. And what we would do is we would work with people who were entrepreneurs who wanted to start a company. And we also worked with people who had a company but were having some issues or some problems. And I'll never forget that so many times the reality of, will I do enough volume to pay the bills and pay me a salary, etc., that the folks had not gotten down to. And I won't go into the long story, but I had a client we worked with who wanted to open up car washes, automated car washes. And he wanted to have 3 of those in a town of 30,000 people. And based on the best statistics we could get, we said to him, if you can get 1 up and going, you're going to be lucky, because an automatic car wash is extremely expensive. It is a big capital investment. It was then and it is now. and you have to have so many washes per day. And as we looked at it with the 3 that he wanted to open up, every car in town is going to have to be washed twice a week. And that was just the simple mathematics of it. And of course, he didn't want to hear that. And so he went and got his loan. And I saw him a few years later, and he said, I owe you an apology, because he gave me a lot of trouble about it, a lot of business about it. And he had a relative at the bank who had loaned him some money, etc. And he said, I'm awfully sorry about this. And so I said, I'm very sorry it happened to you. He said, you were right. It wasn't going to work. And he gave me no pleasure in that conversation. There was no, I told you so, anything like that. It was a very sad conversation. He had lost everything he had. Well, now let's go ahead and look at the rest of this spreadsheet. Now, as I mentioned to you, I also, in these older cases, incorporate some things like charting. And we're not going to do any work with this, but if you want to kind of reconstruct this chart, I'm going to show you how you can do it. First of all, you can click and you can click on Select Data. And you're going to see the legend entries, that's the series. And those are the fixed costs, total costs, and the revenue, okay? And then over on the horizontal or the category axis, I had the number of units sold. And you can mess around with that if you want to see the formatting and all of that. You can right-click, and it will show you how I added the data labels, the trend lines, and all that business, okay? And this is a nice chart, but you can notice if you look at the green line, here's the revenue. As you've heard me say before, when we try to visualize this stuff, we want it to be as simple as possible. And here's the story. I can look and see I have fixed costs. Those never change. They stay the same. I have the green line is the revenue, okay? And then the red line is the total cost. And notice right here, the company breaks even at selling 1,147 units. This is a break-even analysis using units, okay? And if I'm up here in this area, kind of towards the northeast quadrant of this chart, I'm making money. If I'm here in the southwest quadrant of this chart, I'm below break even, I'm losing money. And I put together a nice statement here, a pro forma. And remember, the word pro forma means for the sake of. It's a tool that we put the data into a way that we can see it. Now, and understand how these things work. So let's look at this and what I've got here, and I've got the units sold, okay? And I worked out 4 scenarios, okay, or 4 possible outcomes. And as I've said before, when we talk about decision making, which is what you're going to be paid to do, there are really 3 things you always have to remember. First of all, you've got to get the best information you can possibly get. You cannot shortcut this. If you get bad numbers, it's like the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. Okay? So you've got to do that. Number 2, you always have to remember that the results you get are not black and white or good and good or bad. They're more like on a continuum, ranges of gray from, well, that's pretty much what I expected, to, yee, that was a failure, to, wow, I never thought I could do this. You could, and you have to understand that, okay? Now, the last thing is you always have to understand when you make a decision that there are always these things called unintended consequences. When I make a decision in a company, I will always create unintended consequences, things that I didn't intend to happen, okay? But they do. Things that, and I'll give you a good example. A company will start a bonus program, and they won't be smart enough to realize that if you have a bonus program, you do run the risk that the person, let's say you have a bonus program based on sales, and you do have the risk that while your top seller or salesperson will get the award and they'll be highly motivated, the person who came in second, who may have had numbers nearly as good, is now demotivated, and you may lose that person and lose a significant employee. So you always have to be thinking about what might be the unintended consequences. Well, let's look at this pro forma, and it's pretty simple in terms of how it's put together, and we used cell referencing as well. And again, the chart, you can take a look at it and right click it and see how it was put together. And as I said before, it's just a simple line chart. And I've got some nice little formatting in there with a legend. And it shows you very clearly we've got to sell 1,147 units to be at break even. And here's the chart. We have how much we sell at 0, break even. Okay, half break even, break even. Let's say we do 50% better than we thought we would, or let's say we do twice as well as we did. And so where did you get the number of the 1147? Well, here it is, the break even units. Okay, and notice I've used the name manager, and the break even units equals the total fixed costs. And I'll go ahead and click inside here so you can see the total fixed costs divided by the contribution margin per unit. In other words, the break-even units is how many of these units have I got to sell to make at least $25,700 to pay my fixed costs. Okay? And that's how it's calculated. Then we have a thing called break-even revenue. And we'll click it here. And again, you'll see the advantages of using a name manager. And as we've gone through this and we've worked through these cases, yes, it's a little tedious, okay? It kind of wears you out, but nonetheless, it's a good practice because it lets me speak English in these formula bars as opposed to just cell references. And it's break-even units times the sales price. So if I want to know how much money I've got to make, the break-even revenue, I have to sell $45,837 worth of those jams. I think it's a case of jam that they sell. A case is 12 or something like this. It's been a while since I looked at the case. So we know how we have to have in break-even units. Now, I always think that the better analysis is break-even units because that tells you how many of these you've got to sell, not the dollar volume, okay? And so I think the unit on the per unit basis is always the best way for you to go because it puts it into perspective. And think about it for a minute. If I'm going to sell 1,147 cases of jam every year, well, every week of the year, you can do the math. You can divide 1147 by 52 and figure out how many you've got to sell every week. You can divide that by 7 and figure out how many you got to sell every day. And so that starts to bring you down to reality. Okay, let's say, whoa, and obviously you're going to sell a whole bunch of this jam during Christmas or something like this. You'll have this. This is probably going to be a seasonal product, but you pray and you hope that you have a steady business to carry it. Now, this person who's starting Badger Jams may say, I hope and pray it's accepted well enough and I do well enough that I can go to somebody, I can go to Walmart, for example, and say, will you carry my jam? And folks who deal with them as a vendor, you best be prepared to deal with this giant who can crush you any minute. The moment you sign a contract with them, for them to carry your product, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're Procter & Gamble or whatever. They will tell you, here's how much you'll send. Here's the amount of shelf space you'll have. Here's the advertising support that you can have in the store. Here's how much we want you to spend in terms of advertising outside, okay, your own ads on TV or internet or whatever, and it goes from there. And they'll tell you how much stock you have to have. They'll have quality control. They'll come out and visit you and sit with you, because they're not going to let you in their door, because they know they're a gigantic platform. And rare is the product that gets into a Walmart that isn't a good product that stays. Rare is that. Once they start to get complaints, once people start returning the product, then Walmart, their management starts to say, we need to rethink this. Well, enough of all that. But let's look at this here. Now we have as we ought to construct a worksheet, we've got this, we have this output area. We have the graphic output over here in this line chart, the break-even chart. And now we have this pro forma. And we'll start with the number of sales at 0. And so we have no revenue because we don't sell any. We've already spent the $25,700. That's a sunk cost. That money's gone. You spent it. Okay. And since we don't have any, we haven't sold anything, we end up with $25,700 in the hole. And you have a profit or loss. And notice here I used conditional formatting on the profit or loss line, indicate that continuum or range of possible outcomes. All the way in this, for example, where we go from, we didn't sell a single case of this stuff. And so the rest of your life, you're giving jam away to your relatives at Christmas or for their birthdays, and they regift each other, and it just becomes this continuous cycle of old stuff. Or we do half break even. We do about half as well as we needed to do. We hit about 50%, and that's we end up with, we sell 574. That gives us our revenue. Notice the cell reference and the use of the name manager. Then I've got the total fixed costs, and I've got the variable costs. And notice there I'm using the name manager. And then I come down here to the total cost, and I take revenue less variable revenue less total cost, and that gives me my profit or loss. And notice we were in red. Now we're over here in kind of this tomato. We're in this deep dark red. Then it kind of slides to this orange. And now we're in the caution territory. We're at break even. Okay. We've sold 1,147 cases. Okay. And we're using, of course, we're using the name manager. You can see how we put this together. And we talked about how to go into the name manager and add a name and then use it in a formula. And then we have our revenue, fixed cost, the variable cost, and then the total cost, and then the profit or loss. And at this point, we're at 0. So we've sold as many cases of the stuff as we needed to break even in our first year, let's say, of operation. Or if we're using this pro forma as a planning tool, we know what we need to do. This is just like when we looked at the city of Clintwood, and we did we looked at that city and the city government, and we looked at their revenue versus their expenses. And we remember we did the forecasts for 2 more years, and we had that assumptions area, and it enabled us to say, okay, how do we tweak this? Okay. And so we could do the same thing here with the assumptions area, but for now, we're just going to stick with this concept of break-even analysis. Okay. And we're looking at in terms of unit. Now let's say, all right, we do 50% better. You said, Dr. Harmon, could I make that a 1.1% break even and maybe a 1.25? Yes, you can put this. I just for convenience, I put this. We do 50% better than we thought we would. We do twice as well as we thought we would. We think we'll break even. We hope we'll break even. If we do, we may have a fighting chance. Okay, and so I have the revenue, okay, and then the fixed costs, and the variable costs, and the total cost, and then we have our profit or loss. And at this point, if we do 50%, if we sell 50% more units than we thought we would, okay, then we end up with a profit of $12,850. Now, if I come over here, it should be no surprise to you that if I do twice break even, the profit will be twice as big as it was at 1.5 break even. So here we sell twice as many as we thought we would, and we go, wow, it takes off. For some reason, people like it, or maybe we have somebody that buys a whole slug of it, or let's say that a restaurant says, hey, I really like your jam, and I've got 5 restaurants. Could we use it? Okay, who knows? You know, maybe instead of going to Walmart, maybe say, I think I'll go see the people at IHOP, or maybe I'll sit down with the people at Cracker Barrel and see if they'll sell my jam on the shelves, or maybe they'll use my jam, okay, instead of somebody else's. Yeah, who knows? I can tell you one thing that's difficult for folks to understand, and this is most of the time in Walmart can basically charge you shelf space. Okay, you pay to play, you pay to be there, you pay to have advertising. Now here's how they do it. You'll come in and say, well, we sell this for we sell our jam costs $39.95 a case. And Walmart will come back and say, if you're going to sell at Walmart, your jam is going to cost $23 a case. Take it or leave it. Well, what do? Well, if I know my contribution margin, I know I'm making about 30 cents. I'm making 60 cents a case. All right, because I know my contribution margin is 22.4, and they'll want to see your figures on this. They won't put you in, anybody, a big retailer, they want to make sure that if they're going to use the shelf space and go through all the problems they have to do, ordering your stuff and all of that, you're going to be around next year. And they'll tell you, no, your price, your price to us is going to be $33 a case. But we think you'll sell 150,000 cases of this. And you go, okay, where do I sign up? And then you hope you can meet their demand, etc. Okay, so we've got we've looked at these, and we have a nice visual here in the profit and loss. We have this nice graph chart as well. So we visualize the data. We've used a simple pro forma that helps us look at the possible outcomes. But then down in the bottom here, I show you reality. And this is the economic profit or loss. And notice this is B34 plus the entrepreneur's savings. Remember, you took your life savings out and you lived on it for a year. So and that $25,000 loss is really an $89,000 loss. That $12,000 loss is really a $76,000 loss. Here, you just lost your life savings. You say, boy, you make it sound great. I understand that. Look, there are people out there who are billionaires who have never had a day of business school, or are very wealthy, or have done very well. Don't fool yourself. those are not normal people, okay? They're not normal people like you and me that have to go learn these things. They just have a feeling for it. It's kind of like, I want to play NBA basketball. Now, there's not a one of you that are hearing me in this that have never laid eyes on me, okay? And I'm not NBA basketball material. I wasn't NBA basketball material when I was in the prime of my life in my early 20s. I couldn't shoot a basketball that well. I certainly didn't have the vertical jump. It didn't matter how much I practiced or worked. I was never going to be as good as a Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan is a freak of nature. LeBron James is a freak of nature. He just has this combination of DNA and a body and a will to win and a work ethic that makes him who and what he is. Okay. Now, there are some people who were just about good enough to get in and play in the NBA who take what talent they have and they absolutely multiply it as much as they can. And that's those other players. Okay. LeBron James has a bad year for him is the best year of somebody's career for 85% of the people playing in the NBA. Okay. So don't kid yourself. Starting a business is not an easy process, and it's a high-risk process, and it takes a lot of courage to do it. So when you go to work for somebody, respect the fact that they undertook a risky venture. And if it's a big company and they've been around 50 or 100 years, say to yourself, I'm lucky because I'm with some people that know how to do, how to perform and how to run a business, okay? And finally, you see over here this, even though we sold twice as many as we thought, okay, we used up our $64,000. You said, well, Dr. Harmon, what if I had the 64, but say I took, and I put half of it back and lived on the 32,000. And if you could do that, fine. Then you can try this for 2 years, okay? This would be the kind of thing if you said, well, realistically, how would you do this? I'd say, keep your day job and do this in the evenings and the weekends and try to kind of build the thing up and get it going. You might eventually be able, maybe you could sell it over the internet. And so you go home from your job at night and you're there and you're wrapping stuff and packaging up and sending it out the door. Hey, that may be the best it'll ever be, but at least you'll never be in that situation where it becomes a calamity, okay? Or be a franchisee. Okay? I have a guy here, a company, it's a UPS store here, and I have used them a lot over the years, and I like to talk to the owner because he's always telling me about all the training they put him through and his employees. They have standards, and to be a franchisee for them, he has to do certain things, and he has to really be careful with his financials. They're not going to put somebody in there and let them fail. They can't. It's a black mark on them. It hurts their brand. So, he works for them as well as Uncle Sam and his employees. And he said, then I finally get paid. But he's his own boss, and he has an opportunity, if he does well, to pick up some additional locations. So I wanted to show you this not only with just some of the techniques we've used, like the name manager, like building the performa, again, using color to convey the different outcomes that we get and building this chart, okay? To also talk about this process of being an entrepreneur and starting a company. What is that? And the tool that we use is break-even analysis. Now, I want to spend just a little bit of time on the chart, okay? And I'm going to kind of deconstruct it for you. And you should, as we go through time, we won't spend a lot of time on charting. It would probably, to go into the depth I would love to go in with you, would be another course. But nonetheless, let's look at this, okay? And the first thing I want to do is I want to click in the chart. All right, when I click it, and we can click change chart type. Okay. Now it's going to tell us the type of change that we have right now. the type of chart. And we're using a line chart with markers. Okay? And we're doing that so we can show fixed costs, total costs, and revenue. Okay? And we can see that spot where total revenue and total costs are equal. And of course, everything up from there is profit. Everything below, we're running at a loss. So I know I can right click in there. I can see, first of all, the kind of chart that it is. Now notice the chart tools, and you can click in the design areas. And so I found, okay, what kind of chart am I using first of all? All right. Now the next thing I want to do is, all right, I want to find out, okay, where do these data come from? Now here, the vertical is also known as the series, or it's also known as the series. It's also the y-axis. Okay. And we always put the variable of interest in the y-axis. Then we have the x-axis, or the horizontal axis, okay? And this is what we call the independent variable. That is something we're using as a benchmark for the y-axis. And here, as you notice, we're looking at costs and revenues. Okay, and on the y-axis, and on the x-axis, I have the units sold. Okay, now I'm going to click here on the y-axis, and I'm going to click Select Data, right-click it, and then click Select Data, and I get the Data Source dialog box, and you can see it there. And you'll notice that I have some entries for the series, the Legend series, and you'll see fixed cost, total cost, and revenue. Now I'm going to click on fixed cost, and then I'm going to click Edit. And what we do when we choose that series is we give it a series name, and notice there that I used that name equal Badger Jams, okay, and I used A29, and then the series values are B29 to F29, okay, and those are, and that's what's it's equal Badger Jams, the worksheet, and then cell A29 where that word fixed cost is at, and then B29 to F29 are those figures, and it's 25,700. Okay, so, and you can take this file and play around with the chart a little bit, and you'll find it's a fairly intuitive process. The book walks you, your textbook walks you through step by step by step. But I've found over time, when I see a good chart, the first thing I do is start right-clicking in various elements of it to see what did they do. Okay. This is not too bad a chart. And then I'll look at total costs. I'll click it on it, and I'll click Edit. And you notice I can remove these or bring them up and down. And here I have cell A33 is the series name. And see that Badger Jams, and then the Badger Jams with the single quote and the exclamation part, that says what worksheet you're in. Okay, and then we have the cell reference, which is A33, which is the word total cost. That's the output. And then we have the series values, where we have B33 through F33. And it shows us what those values are. So good so far. And then I can click revenue, and I'll click unit. And I can see the series name, and then the series values. Now in this dialog box, all right, notice I can remove these, or I can rearrange them. And this is one of the nice features is if I don't like the look on this break-even analysis, then I know that the fixed cost is going to be a line right across, okay? Following, it's just going to go straight across. It's fixed. It doesn't change. So I have total costs and total revenue, and I put the total costs and then the total revenue in that order because that's what makes the most sense and communicates. You could rearrange them if you wanted to. It won't break. And if you do something and go, I've fouled it all up, just close it and don't save the changes, okay? But it's something there for you to explore. That's why I do these workshops, so you can kind of explore with them and work with them. Better you do that now than later on, and you didn't kind of pay attention and you need to do something like this. Charting's not that difficult. Most of the textbooks that cover step by step how to do it, they fry your brain. I'll just be real honest with you. Now we have to have what we call the horizontal axis, okay? And let's look over here. And notice I'm going to click on the horizontal axis, and I'll click Select Data, okay? And I can edit those. And what I chose to do was to get all of those units sold. And you notice I come up here, and I'll click Edit. And notice I have the range, the axis label range, and it's cells B25 to F25, the units sold. So I'm seeing the break-even units, my break-even point at different levels of units sold. 0, 574, which is half of break-even, 1,147, which is break-even, and then 1,721, which is break-even plus 50% above break-even, and then 2,295, which is twice break-even. Now, I also have some areas that I telegraph up here. And when I'm building a chart, you always ought to have 3 things. 4, you need to have a title for the whole chart. Okay? Then you need to have, whatever this is on the y-axis, you need to identify it. And here we put its costs and revenues. Then the horizontal axis, the same story, and then some kind of legend. Now, if you click inside the legend, of course, you can change the sizing of this to adjust it. But what you see, when we chose the legend series, here they are, and they will start with the familiar green, blue, green, and red. Typically, it'll go to a default in that order. And I'm going to click here, and we'll click on the chart tools. Let's click on the design, and that's the type of chart. And you'll notice over here, you'll have a add chart element. Okay? And that is if you want to add a chart title, where you want to put it, data labels, that's there for you in terms of the axis titles, the primary horizontal title, the primary vertical title. You want, the axes, you want to have a chart title, you want to have it above the chart, centered overlay, and that's what I've got there, centered overlay. And you can see you just got some choices. You hopefully when you took the 1103 course with us, the Fluency in Information Technology, you learned a lot of this about charting. I hope you did. Okay. So we've gone through the lessons that we can use here, and of course the contribution margin. And you'd say, well, Dr. Harmon, if I want, since I've got these assumptions area plugged in, can I, if I want to, play around with those a little bit and see what things look like? You most certainly can. Now understand that the chart will change as you play with these, and you can, and really where you want to ignore that, and you'll want to look down here and see what happens as you say, maybe you change the sale price. Maybe you say, well, I negotiated the rent down $2,000. And let's just do this. We won't break it. Like I said, in all else fails, close the spreadsheet and don't save the changes. Okay? So let's just do that. And don't pay attention to the chart because it's going to start to look all jumbly and strange to you. Yeah, well, as we do this, and let's say, okay, I've got the sale price is $39.95, but somebody said, well, that's probably a little bit too. You probably could get some more. So we'll say, okay, well, but I'm going to be conservative. I'm going to leave it at that. But say the rent. I go to the people I'm going to rent the space from, and I say, look, this is putting it pretty tight for me. If you'd like me to be your tenant and stay here, then I need you to help me out a little bit. And they said, well, okay, we can drop the rent down to $10,000. So we'll put $10,000 in there. Let's see what happened. And notice immediately my total fixed costs go down. My break-even units drop. The break-even revenue goes down. And you can see over here as I look, I've moved. I'm still, well, the chart just reflects the changes in the data. I didn't trust I'd done it well enough, but obviously I did. And so now I only have to sell 1,058 units because I've gotten that fixed cost taken care of. And advertising, well, maybe I can't do anything, but let's say I look at the commercial stove. And instead of buying a brand new spanking, or say maybe instead of buying the really top of the line stove, I get it on a deal. Who knows? But let's say maybe I get it down to $6,500. Now I've dropped the break-even units even more, the break-even revenue required even more. Now, as you've heard me talk about scenarios, et cetera, this is one of the ways with the assumptions area. I can take a look and see how things are going to be. And I could use the scenario manager to put in different figures for those fixed costs based on some new assumptions or new data. Okay, but I know this. It's going to be easier for me to sell 1,027 cases than it would be to sell 1,147, which is where I was at that point. So and we'll just back out of these changes we've made. That's simple enough. Okay, and we're back to where we were when we started. And so let's do this. I'm going to take a gander here and let's do a scenario. And so click data and come over to the far right into the forecast area and click the what if analysis. Okay. And you're going to see our little friend goal seek, which we'll take a look at in a minute. And we're going to look at the scenario manager. And I'm going to add a scenario. I'm going to call this base case. And these are my base figures. And I'll click OK. And so I want to go back here. Because I want to choose my I'm going to call this base case. And I want to select these cells in the fixed costs. Okay. So those will be the cells I'm going to change, B12 to B15, which is the rent through the cooking equipment. I'll click OK. And it's got those figures in there. I'll click OK. And now I have this scenario, and I could just simply click Show. All right. And there it is. Well, let's say I want to add another one. And I'm going to click Add. And the scenario name will be Base Case. Okay. I'm going to call this Base Case and rent low. And I'm going to do it by changing the cells, and it already has these cells B12 through B15. So that's in there. And I'll click OK. I can even put some notes in here if I want to. I'm going to click OK. And then on the stove, instead of 12,000, pardon me, instead of the rent, I got them to come down to 10,000. And I said, okay, can you just keep it at 10,000 for a couple of years, and then let's come back and renegotiate it. And if I make a go of this, I'll make it worth your while. Okay. Most people are reasonable, and most people, if it's in there, if it's a prime location and they got people begging them to get in there, they're going to auction the thing off the highest bidder. But if they have commercial property and they want to get it rented, they'll probably work with you because they want income and money coming in there. So we're going to change the cell B12, and then we click Show, and it does that for us. Okay. And the break even, of course, moved down to 1,058. Now I can add another one, and we'll click on it. I'm going to click Add, and I'm going to call this Base Case Stove Low. So I make some savings on the stove. Now you say if you really want to be pessimistic, you could do scenarios where this stuff's higher than you thought it would be, and that's fine. I'll click OK. Now I want to make sure I change my stove back to 12,000 because that was what we figured. But I figured I'm going to get the stove down to $6,500. I got a deal on it somehow, and I'm good to go. We'll click OK. And then we click Show. And you can see we've reduced that break even. Not terribly, but to a better place than it was for sure. And I can just do this over and over. So I'm gonna close this off. Really, what I'm going to do is come back here to the wall, to the scenario manager. So, okay, I want to go back to where I originally was. I'll just click Base Case. Now, you said, what good have you really done yourself? What good I've done myself is I've depicted my operations using a good model, a mathematical model, where I can forecast or show conditions that might happen. Okay. And then I know I have a good feeling of how things are going to work, what will really happen, or as close to what can happen as possible. Well, that pretty much exhausts that as far as using the Badger Jams. As I said, there's a lot in here, so I wanted to really talk with you about entrepreneurship and the courage it takes and the variables that get involved in all of that. And if you want to do that, I guarantee you, go forward. All right. I would also say this: if you go to work for somebody and you have an entrepreneurial spirit, these people are typically called intrapreneurs because they're inside a company, but they have an entrepreneurial spirit. Your boss is probably going to notice you and say, I've got somebody that thinks like I do and wants to make this thing go and understands that a good company doesn't grow on trees. We just don't spend a bunch of money and it happens. It takes a lot of hard work and cooperation and teamwork, plus money, plus some good fortune, frankly, for those things to happen. All right, so we'll go here and we'll close off Badger Jams. Of course, you can upload that. And I'm going to say I'm not going to save any of the changes I've got. Now, there's the second file where we're going to learn about goal seek and that technique. And I'll go back up here and back over into the textbook. And that we're going to look with that Lemonade GS file, that XLS file. And over here, they show us how to use the goal seek. Now, we just got through playing around with the scenario manager. Let's use the goal seek and see what that's all about. And remember, this is under the What If series. So I'm going to close this. Well, if you want to see the step by step, you can go over to chapter 18 in the textbook and they'll walk you through it. And let's take a look at this for just a minute, because I can probably show you here, and then you can play with the file itself to get the feeling. Here up here in figure 18.1, we have, they have I guess they're selling lemonade. But it's a big day for lemonade and jam, isn't it? And so we're going to sell lemonade. So I have the price of $3. I have a level of demand. I have a unit cost. Does it start to sound familiar? I have a fixed cost, and that produces a set amount of revenue, and the revenue is going to be $3 times the demand, i.e. sales. That gives me the revenue. And the revenue, and then I have variable costs, and as we saw earlier, the revenue minus the variable costs plus the fixed cost gives me my profit, and we're breaking even. In other words, we know that we've got to sell 17,647 units at $3 a pop to make this puppy at break even. And so they show us here the goal seek tool. And that's over in the what if analysis section, the right hand over there in Excel. I click on what if and I click goal seek. And I set the cell. I find the target cell. Okay. And it's D7. And that's profit. And to a value of 0. And then we say, okay, what cell do I change? And the changing cell is D2, and that's the demand. Because we're worried about demand or sales. And we get that figure. Okay? They'll walk you through step. Now, again, I have these cases, and I've tweaked them and worked with them, played with them for years, so they're just like in my brain. But I also provided you this textbook. If you want to have something that'll take you step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I correlate up what I've got here in terms of a case with what you can work with here in this book. And the book has some really, really good models, and they do a good job with that. Let's go down and you have that file. You should save it to your desktop, and that's the Lemonade GS file. And I mentioned that in the resources for this XLS 6. So let's open this thing up, take a look at it. All right. Now I've got price, okay? demand, the unit cost, fixed cost. He said, Dr. Harmon, why wouldn't you just go ahead and go in there and click on formulas and create a name manager? And well, you could. And well, they have. Okay? And they've done all that work for us. They just chose not to use the, the define, using a formula, but you could. So here's the price, and we could see that we've got break even, and this is where equals revenue minus fixed cost minus variable cost. Makes sense. There's the variable cost. And it's the unit cost times the demand. Remember, variable costs are costs that change with the unit sold. And then we have revenue. And you can click on it and they go hot. Well, let's say, all right, what if I want to make, I want to have a profit of $10,000. Okay. What price do I need to sell these at? Let's say I have to sell them at 3. How many of these do I have to sell to have a profit of $10,000? Well, okay, we're going to click on data and we'll come over to the what if analysis, click on it, and we'll click goal seek. We've already met the scenario manager today. And I say, okay, I'm going to set a cell. What's my target cell? And here it is. And that's D7. And that's going, and I want to see what I've got to, how many of these units do I have to sell to make $10,000 in profit? And I'll do the changing cell is going to be D2, and that's the demand. And I'll click OK. And to make $10,000, I've got to sell 21,568 units. Okay? Now, one of the things I don't like about this, and I'm looking at it right here, is this. And we'll click OK. Or we can, let's just click cancel and go back to the original figures. Click on home, and this is one of these things that's aggravating. This is demand, but you've got it carried out to 4 decimals, which is maybe this is from a prior case they had in the textbook. There's no point in this. There's no such thing as 0.05 of a unit of something. Units are discrete units. No, this might be water or electricity, something of that, the more continuous prior. So we'll go. But just for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to take it out to do that to 2 decimals. Unless it makes sense, I'm going to leave it at 1764. And somebody's all that whacked out about it, they can look up in the formula bar and see it. So you can see that's how I use the goal seek. Well, you do it one more time here. I'm going to click on data. What if analysis? I click goal seek. And I want to set the cell. I want to set profit. And instead of 10,000, I say I want to make 5,000. I want to make $5,000. And I'm do that by changing the cell for price. How many do I have to sell to make $5,000 profit at what price? And I'll click, I'll go okay. And there we are. And I've got to price it now to make $5,000. I put 50,000. I want 5,000. Putting too many zeros. So let's cancel that. And let's do the OC again. I'm going to set the cell here to 5,000. I put in too many zeros. 5,000. changing the cell, the price. I'll click OK. And so I have to sell these at $3.28 to make $5,000 in profit. Okay? Well, that pretty much covers it. Now, you have either one of these files that you can upload for your workshop credit for this. And I'm going to close this off now. And you can upload Badger Jams or this Lemonade GS file. Okay, you can do that. And then if you want, also, and we'll go back over here to the modules area, you can also, if you desire, I have a key. You can upload it for upload 6 here. On Thursday, I'll spend some time talking about the exam part 1, the exam that'll be coming up next week. Okay? Thank you. Stay safe out there, and I'll stop the share and then stop the recording, and thank you for your time.